If you were around for the early to mid 2010s mobile game era, then you experienced one of the best eras not only in mobile gaming history, but in gaming history in general. There were so many iconic games that came out during this period of time, many of which defined our childhoods and inspired future mobile games to come. But when I look at the games that I and a lot of other people played during this time, an interesting pattern begins to show up. A huge number of these games were packed to the brim with blood, gore, and violence. This was a trend that we mostly saw in mobile games specifically at that time. During this time, PC and console gaming was thriving, and none of those games really needed a bunch of gore to attract a player base. But for some reason with the mobile games, it seemed like the main attraction of a lot of these games was just the insane amount of blood they could pack into the game. So today, let's look at why mobile games were this way back then and some examples of these games that you might remember. Before mobile devices had these huge selections of apps that you could just download from an app store, their main use was to make and receive calls and text messages. And if you wanted to play a quick game just to kill some time, your best bet would be to play some flash games. There was this era in internet history that a lot of people like to call the golden age of flash games, which ran between 2003 and 2010. This was when the popularity of flash games was peaking and thousands of flash games were being released. You had websites like Newgrounds, Miniclip, and Armor Games, which were super popular at the time. From this era, we got games like Happy Wheels and Whack Your Boss, and you've definitely seen gameplay of both of these games as they were super popular at the time. Mobile app stores released in 2008, so more towards the end of this golden era of flash games. And so a lot of inspiration was drawn from these games. One of the main things that mobile games took as inspiration from flash games at the time was the huge obsession with physics and ragdoll based games. If I ask you to name some of your favorite mobile games from back in the early 2010s, there's definitely a good chunk of them that were physics based and had ragdoll mechanics as their main selling point. And part of this physics based trend was blood splatter effects. At the time, if your game had a way for your character to get injured, you best believe it was gonna be accompanied with a ton of blood splatter effects. So now that we know that flash games were the main inspiration for a lot of these violent and gory mobile games, that begs the question of why developers leaned into it so hard. You see, back then, most people weren't too sure about where the mobile gaming landscape would be heading. And a lot of people that were making these mobile games were either developers working on their own or small teams of people with barely any budget. And so they didn't have a bunch of money to dump on advertising, especially because advertising was also not as easily accessible as it is now. So one of their main ways to market their apps was through pure shock value. The games would have these very weird thumbnails with lots of blood splattering everywhere, and maybe even a little bit of torture here and there. All of this violence was an instant hook and attracted pretty much any mobile user at the time. Mobile gaming was also not taken as seriously at the time as it is now, and not many developers were making fully fledged games, and so they purely relied on virality and shock value. At the time, there was no TikTok, no YouTube Shorts, and no Instagram Reels. Developers had to rely on the title of their game, their icon, and the pictures on their app's page to try to get the attention of people. During this time, it was a total free-for-all in the mobile gaming space. Rules weren't that strict, and age ratings were not fully enforced, so developers could just keep on pushing the limits further and further. Another reason why this era of violent mobile games lasted so long was because that was really all they could do. You see, ragdoll effects and blood splatter were pushing the technical limits of mobile devices at the time, because mobile devices were super weak and you couldn't really get AAA graphics on a mobile game in 2010. The ragdoll effect still felt pretty groundbreaking at the time and were the new big thing every developer wanted to add to their game. It was easy to implement but still made for a fun experience, and that's a big part of why there were so many of these games. A problem with a lot of these games is that they are mainly marketed towards kids. Kids were the biggest mobile audience, and so targeting them was an easy strategy. Kids loved these sort of edgy games with lots of blood and violence because it made them feel more rebellious. Developers knew this and they exploited it even further, adding more chaos and even more blood into their games. A couple of years later, people started getting tired of seeing the same things over and over again, and rules around blood and gore got stricter, and overall this genre of games really lost its shock value because of the sheer number of games that were being being released. All of the blood used to be shocking, and then it became normal, and then it became boring, marking the end of one of the most iconic eras of mobile gaming. Now that we've talked about some of the history behind why old mobile games were so violent, let's look at some classics from this era. Starting off, we have a game that I, along with many others, put a bunch of hours into back in the day. This is Falling Fred. Released in 2012, Falling Fred is a physics-based mobile game where you control Fred as he ragdolls and falls through these huge vertical shafts to try and avoid all of the obstacles and make it safely down to the bottom. Well, at least somewhat safely. You can see Fred's face in the top left of the screen, and it serves as a sort of damage indicator, because when you hit an obstacle, yeah. It also seems like Fred's limbs are just taped onto his body because they seem to come off at any inconvenience, and the result is you free falling, missing half your limbs with blood raining everywhere. We've seen these concepts in games like Minecraft Dropper, where you have to dodge obstacles while you're falling and make it all the way down to the bottom. But I will say that this game is probably one of the first instances of a dropper game, but just taken to an absolute extreme level with all of the gore. Next up, we have a classic. This is Charlie the Steak, and if you've been around my channel for a while, you've definitely heard of or at least seen this game. I would say that this game is the Talking Tom of gore games. It's just you and this steak named Charlie, and you get to torture him in any way your heart desires. There's different levels to the game, with each level containing more gruesome animations and a more injured Charlie. And honestly, some of these animations can get pretty gory. Like there's one of them where you can literally take his eyeball out, and another where you drill his teeth out, which is not a very pleasant sight to see. This game was actually lost media for years, and there was a whole search to find it in 2024, but I honestly would say that this game is the pinnacle of gory mobile games. And I can't make a video about violent video games without mentioning Kick the Buddy. This is the classic quote-unquote stress relief app where you're placed in a room with a ragdoll character named Buddy, and your goal is just to make his life miserable. You can grab him and throw him around the room, you can throw objects at him, and the more you hurt him, the more money you get in the game. And you can use this money to buy new weapons and new methods to torture him even further. There was a huge catalog of unlockable tools, and they start off with simple maces and swords and things of that nature, and go up to complex machines and meat grinders and a tub of water where you could put wires in to electrocute him. The game wasn't too gory, but it definitely was violent, and it wasn't super easy, but you could actually kill Buddy and have him respawn if you beat him up enough. But yeah, this game is a classic, and I'm sure most of the people watching this have played it or at least heard of it. Next up, we have a game that's quite similar to the last one called Beat the Boss. And this game is very functionally similar to Kick the Buddy, and it definitely was inspired by it, except the main character in this one is supposed to be your boss. And this kind of ties into the stress relief aspect of a lot of these games, where some people could be having a hard time at work and may not like their boss too much, so they start playing this game instead to get their anger out. And I don't know if that method works, but this game was definitely super popular back in the day, and I personally enjoyed it a lot more than Kick the Buddy. Anyways, that's all I have to cover for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know if you can think of any other games that could have made it into this video. Comment down below what topics you'd like me to cover next, and a like and sub would be truly appreciated. See ya!